Welcome to the Expert Exchange, the podcast where knowledge meets success, with your host, Joshua Carnes, and expert guest, Laurie Canepa. Today's show is brought to you by Lion Business Advisors.
The content in this show is for informational purposes only. You should not construe any such information or other material as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. The Expert Exchange is not a fiduciary by virtue of any person's use of or access to this content. The Expert Exchange is not licensed to practice law or provide legal advice. Nothing contained within this show is intended to be an offer to either buy or sell securities.
Welcome to the Expert Exchange, the podcast where knowledge meets success. I'm your host, Josh Carnes, and on today's episode, we are going to be diving into the hiring landscape here in Central Texas with our expert guest, Laurie Canepa. Did I say that right?
You said it right. Yeah.
All right. So Laurie joins us today from StevenDouglas. You can find more about Laurie online at StevenDouglas.com. That's StevenDouglas.com. With that, we're going to take a quick break from our sponsors and we'll dive into today's show.
At Lion Business Advisors, selling a business is not just a transaction. You've poured your heart and soul into your business. It's not just a paycheck, it's your legacy. The team at Lion Business Advisors is here to guide you through the process, ensuring your successful exit. Contact the team at Lion Business Advisors at 800-525-3542. That's 800-525-3542, or visit us at lionbusinessadvisors.com. Lion Business Advisors. Let the story of your next chapter begin with us.
So get ready to expand your horizons and refine your strategies as we dive into the hiring process and the hiring landscape here in Central Texas today with our expert guest, Laurie Canepa. Laurie is currently the managing director for both Central and South Texas, specializing in both finance and accounting search for StevenDouglas. Laurie has spent over 15 years as a partner and division director for one of the top boutique accounting firms and finance search firms in Texas. As a top producer there, she played a critical role in bringing the firm to its pinnacle, creating major growth opportunities and an array of successful placements. The first 10 years of Laurie's career were spent getting hands-on experience in the world of public accounting, as well as executive industry accounting and a corporate controller. Laurie has been featured in the Austin Woman magazine, as well as Texas Wall Street Woman, and is a member of the Texas Society of CPAs. She's active within nonprofit organizations such as Impact Austin, the Professional Women of Williamson County, Dress for Success Austin, and Job Seekers Network, and the Buccaneer Bridge Mentoring Program. Laurie, welcome to the Expert Exchange.
Great.
That was quite a mouthful for all the accounting, CPA, and I love the nonprofit stuff.
Right.
So why don't you put it in your own words, take a little time, introduce yourself, introduce what you do for StevenDouglas, and give us a little update on what that is.
Great. You covered a good portion of it. So my name is Laurie Canepa, and I am based here in Austin, Texas. I actually reside in Round Rock. I've lived here for over 20 years. Started my career on public accounting, and then worked my way into a controller position, and then stepped into this world now 18 years ago. So what StevenDouglas does is I've been doing this for 18 years, but we are a newer brand to Texas. We're a 40-year-old brand founded by Steve Sadika out of PwC. Clearly, he was a Big Four guy and said, you know what, I just don't ever want to work for anybody else in my life, right? And he's fantastic. So we're based out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We cover 25 markets, and our our MO is we don't look to go into markets. It's really about the person that actually knows the market. So for me, they were looking, they talked to me and said, this is a great opportunity for us to move into Texas. So I was their flagship employee that they hired about 2.5 years ago. We now have a presence in Austin, San Antonio, Houston, and Dallas. In that short period of time, we've already worked our way up to be the number 3 contingency search firm here and the number 5 retained search firm here. We do both. So we're not industry specific, we're function specific. So we do anything from senior accountant all the way up through CFO searches. The nice thing for me is, and one of the reasons I came here was knowing the local market, but now having this bigger opportunity and bigger platform of resources for my clients and my candidates. Mm-hmm. When I know I know the skill sets here. When I know that we're, especially SEC reporting is an example. Mm-hmm. We don't have a ton of publicly traded companies here. They say we have 50. I would actually challenge anybody to actually count those. But SEC reporting specifically, the talent is a reflection of what's here. So the pool of talent that is actually here in Austin isn't very deep. So that gives me a great opportunity to, when we have that search, I know that immediately. So I can go out to our 25 other markets and say, Austin's an attractive place for people to come in. We have more people coming here than leaving here, right? So who wants to come to Austin, like who wants to sign up. So
That's a long list right now.
yes, well, it's yes and no, right? I think from the outside, people feel like, oh, Austin's so expensive. I'm like, well, that's really up to you.
Yeah.
I think what makes this area so attractive is that we have drastic extremes in cost of living based in a 20-mile radius.
Yeah.
Like I live in Round Rock. If you take my house and move it downtown, it's like 5 times as much, right? So if the rule of thumb here is closer downtown, farther west, it just depends on what's important to you.
Yeah.
If you want to live on the lake, well, you're going to pay a premium for that, right? If you want more land, you're going to have to move further out, right? So I think from the outside, everyone hears, Austin's expensive. Yes and no. It just determines, you mentioned Provisors. We had this fantastic guy. God, I wish I remember his name right now. That actually did this whole thing about moving here and moving to Austin and what that looks like and how unique it is. And it really does determine on what's important to you, you know? And then there's the county differences too. I think people don't always know there's a drastic difference between living in Williamson County and Travis County.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about different leadership, different government. So part of what I do is in addition to accounting and finance search, I think our value add is actually being able to educate people about this area because people make assumptions about lots of things. I think they make the assumption about, traffic here. I know we talk about traffic all the time. I grew up in the Northeast.
Not that.
And then I lived in California. And so I think for me, I'm like, I was always raised to drive for the right role. I mean, grew up in a small town in Connecticut, like farm town. I always have to drive an hour each way to get the opportunity that I want to. I think Austinites by nature aren't quite used to that.
We don't have the super commuters yet.
No, we don't.
Living in Austin or living in San Antonio, working in Austin or anything crazy like that.
And we're not built for growth. I went to Williamson County Economic Development Conference a few years ago, and there was a guy that actually consults on, the roadways and how to expand. And it was really cool. They had taken a Twitter picture at night from like a satellite of this area. And you look at San Antonio and it looks like a spider web. You look at Houston and it's look like a spider web. Yep. You look at Dallas, it's a spider web. And then you look at Austin. It's a bunch of rivers.
There's a half one.
Rivers and tributaries. Like there's like all these roads that go this way, all these roads that go this way, and there's nothing connecting them, right?
Yeah.
So I think we just really never built for that type of growth. And again, obviously mass commute. I mean, we have commute here, but we have some, mass commute type options, but they don't go as far as they should go. Like some of them will drop you at the mall. Well, that's great, but what if you don't work at the mall? That kind of thing. So, so it's been great, and thank you for having me. This is fantastic for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited. So, in my everyday life, we do a lot of M&A, and we deal a lot in the finance sector and moving people around and companies starting up and growing and exiting. And so it's really interesting to really dive into our topic today, which is the hiring landscape here in Central Texas. And it has a big impact on, large business owners, small business owners. Like you said, there's not a lot of publicly traded companies here, but we do have a few. So let's kind of dive into the topic today. So from your perspective, what industries or what sectors are showing that heightened demand for top talent right now here in Central Texas?
I think from the outside, everyone says Austin technology, right? And yes, we have technology, but we have so much more here than that. Like we work quite a bit in CPG, manufacturing, retail, and a lot of, there's more here. And I think I was doing this in 2008, right? 2008 was just horrible. Like I would never ask for that again. Like people were cutting. Like there was no PPP loan bailout, right? So companies were like, we want to hold on to our cash, right?
Yeah.
So they're like, your 6-figure salary, you're done. We're going to keep our bare minimum to get by. Now, post-pandemic, it's polar opposite, right? They're like, okay, we have a PPP loan bailout that will actually cover our salary. So if you're a CFO, I know I can have you step back into controller duties or senior account. I'm going to squeeze as much as I can out of you. Yeah. And so it was almost polar opposite. They were cutting from the bottom up. I would say in this landscape, I think it's very pandemic-like, and I think there's certain industries that will flourish right now, and certain ones not so much. And I think it depends on who you're backed by, whether you're publicly traded, what your market share is, if it's tied to interest rates. I think it's a little bit fragmented, but it is across the board. I think, for instance, like I said, I think people think technology from the outside. Yeah. I'd say the ones that I see flourish, when you hear the gloom and doom about the rifts, it really is with the larger publicly traded companies, like using Meta as an example. They did rifts, but that's also because I watched them post-pandemic pay everyone 30% above market in the accounting and finance realm. At some point in time, that's going to have to level set. at some point in time. So a lot of, but they don't tell you like it's level setting, right? All you hear is, oh my gosh, another large publicly traded company rift. Now, for us being in Austin and most of our companies between, I would say 50 to 400 million and being often PE or VC backed, it kind of kept us honest through that time period.
Yeah.
Like a PE was like, yeah, that's cute. We're not paying our accounting manager 30% above market. So I think that has actually kept those PEs or VC backed firms or privately held companies probably in a better place than maybe some of the bigger, larger companies who had the checkbook and the pockets to really, they kind of had this very emotional reaction because people don't want to come back to work.
Yeah.
And so they kind of were like, oh my God, we need to fill, and we'll pay whatever we need to pay. My challenge with that is unraveling that a little bit, because if I have a senior accountant or controller who's been paid 30% above market, I'm like, do you want to stay in Austin or not? So to answer your question, I think it's all over the map. I think we have a lot more industries than people. There's a really cool place that we spend in like the robotics space. We work with a PE-backed company in the robotics space, and it's robotics, it's human plus machine. So there's some really cool, interesting. We work in real estate. I mean, there's a lot. We just partnered with UT's real estate development partner, and they're doing a whole new initiative here in town, which is going to be fantastic. So there's a lot more here, and I think it's very broad. But again, I think there's regardless of what industry or vertical you're in, I think you can't just say like one industry is doing great, because it's not, because there's always going to be the exception to the rule. It really just depends on who you're backed by. I mean, who you're backed by. Are you publicly traded? Are you not? The thing when you sit in an accounting and finance seat, you're in a non-revenue generating seat.
Yeah.
And so you can't control that. The beauty is, though, you are the first person to know when the ship is sinking or sailing. So,
you hit on a few things there, not to turn this into a commercial for Austin, but, when we're working with businesses, we get phone calls all the time from buyers looking for a business, and they're like, oh, well, you do tech. And we kind of laugh. So at our company, we almost do no tech. So like, yeah, there's Facebook here, there's Google here, there's Tesla here, there's all that. But like, our company does a ton of manufacturing businesses.
Right.
And we get that phone call and they're like, there's manufacturing in Austin? We're like, actually, there's a lot here. We still have a lot of space, but there's that. And then the second piece that you hit on is the private equity groups, because of the tech that are here. So I definitely think tech had a play in that, but the private equity groups and the money that's here in Austin to fund non-tech startups is also just massive. And we've seen that with groups like ACG and AM&AA and all these lower middle market mergers and acquisition groups that are just absolutely flooding the Austin market. So it's really interesting to dive on that Austin is big tech, but it's not all tech.
It's not. And, I'm a manufacturing girl anyway. So that, I'm a cost accounting girl, right? But to your point, ACG, I'm part of ACG. I lead one of the women's pods there. And one of the reasons that I am a member and part of that is because that's a really good group for mid-market. Like if you're looking to network or mid-market, and they always have some incredible speakers, right?
They do.
They just really, whether it's, most recently they had like CPG, they had like the CEO and founder of like Juiceland. And that was a really great dynamic. And then prior to that, they've had, Rich Shields, who was the original CFO from Yeti Coolers, and now he's the CFO of Arrive Logistics, and talking about why they're never going to go public, right? Because why would we, right? And so it's always interesting conversation. But that group is, it really built here I would say for Austin for sure.
Yeah. So how does the industry and sectors differ from like 2023 is 2024? We're moving to election year. Does any of that have impact on financial recruiting and things like that here in Austin? How is 2023 different than we're going in here? Are we going into a reset in some industries? Are you booming? What does that look like?
I mean, we're incredibly busy, which is always a really good economic reflection of the market. 2023, we were pretty busy too. I don't foresee that changing anytime soon. If anything, I think we'll probably even be more busy because I know, or I can't even talk. The actual, I think that might even increase just because I know that the companies that are coming here. So for instance, you've got Samsung, right? Yeah. Which is going to be a huge culture shock for Taylor. I love Taylor. I love the people in Taylor. And then you've got, Tesla, and then all the Tesla related companies. For instance, we work with eBay. So eBay is definitely moving more of their back office here. So historically with eBay, you would literally, the preference to hire would be in San Jose, secondary Austin.
Yeah.
It's flipped.
Really?
So for me in my world, I have a demand supply issue. I have the demand here and the supply here, which is never a bad thing for me because that's why clients hire us. They hire us to go find, not to throw up a posting. They go for us to actually go and target recruit, be their advocate, and literally say why tell the story. Why is XYZ company the best company to work for in the Central Texas area? I mean, I think in my world too, accounting and finance, we're not an essential business, but we tend to be an essential function to some extent as well. I mean, even during 2008, there was still hiring going on, but it was very, very specific to the healthcare space, right? Because that was an essential business. So I think for my world, it's just it's being very transparent to my candidates about what you're walking into, right? Like, I've worked with a delisted SEC company. I can work with that. I just need transparency behind that, right? It's not for the faint of heart. You have the hours, everything else that goes into that. Where I walk away from business is lack of transparency, lack of inexplicable turnover. Also, the networking and the people that I have, I do a lot. Coming from an audit background, due diligence is just second nature to me. Yeah. So I do a lot of homework and due diligence to really ensure that I am putting someone into a situation that I feel comfortable with. So often when I do walk away from the business, there's actually something secondary behind that as well. I usually, my relationship with Big Four partners, Ps, VCs, investment bankers, it does give me the opportunity to really kind of dig into that to make sure that I'm, really giving somebody a true, accurate picture. Now, I don't have a crystal ball, right? I can't tell you what's going to happen in 3 to 4 years from now, but I can give you a pretty good understanding of what you're walking into today. And I think that's the differentiator between, we always talk about within StevenDouglas, like not all recruiters are created equal. Yeah. And that is true. Just as much as you would research a company you're going to, you should be researching whatever person you're entrusting your resume and your background to. And because I think there's got to be that trust element for sure. Asking for references. I have like 100 and whatever, right? Like, and I think sometimes this is where people go wrong, is really not really kind of delving into that as well. I do care where I place people. I'm not looking to place someone just to place someone. And a lot of this stems from, when I was a controller, I had such a not great experience with a recruiter because he didn't care where he placed me. He just wanted to place me. And then, Austin being a small market, I was working. He was sending my resume out
while you were
all over town without asking me, including to the CPA firm that we were using for tax. So thank gosh I had a really good relationship with that partner, because he's like, I didn't know you were looking. I'm like, why do you know that? And let's talk about that. So I think there's no rules in this world. I wish there was. Coming from accounting, you have AI CPA rules, you have GAAP that you adhere to. In recruiting, there really is no, I wish there was. I'd probably be a whistleblower like 18 times over. So you have to determine how you want to operate, which is one of the primary reasons I came to StevenDouglas. Our CEO, Matt Shore, and my EVP, Elizabeth, talk about it all the time. Like being kind, having grace, and understanding that these are people's livelihoods and you have the ability to positively affect that, but there's a flip side to that too, and a real responsibility that comes along with that. And we can't control that. I think, when I tell my candidates all the time, I can tell you all day long about the job, but when you walk in there, I can't predict personality or culture fit. There's nothing I can change about that. So if you go and talk to the company and say, you know what, just not feeling it, cool, done with it and move on, right?
Yeah.
And I think often where I see other recruiters or firms or executive search professionals go wrong is that, right? At the end of the day, that candidate gets up and goes to that job every day. I do not. I'll always stay in contact with you, but you live that life. I do not. And I think I see that's the biggest mistake that I see in recruiters. But that's, StevenDouglas, that's just kind of our MO. That's part of, we know that it's people business. And at the end of the day, this is their career and that's a serious responsibility, right? So I kind of segued out of there, but.
You're fine. No, and I think that's huge of a value that you personally are bringing to StevenDouglas, because you hit on Austin is a small town.
It is.
Austin is not a New York. It's not, we're not even a Dallas. Like,
no, not even
Austin
close.
is a small town.
Absolutely.
And once you get out there at a certain level, in that lower middle market, mid-market tier, it's a very small town. And so making the right choice for you, your family, and all of that, it has impact in being able to do diligence on companies. It's not hard to call around and find out what's going around with a company. We have turnaround specialists that work with us all the time, and it's like all of a sudden you're getting a call from a turnaround specialist, and you're like, I've already talked to that company too. It's so.
Well, and I think on the flip side of that too, I tell candidates so on the company side, yes, but on the candidate side too, I always recommend them, like, this is a smaller town than you would think. Like, so
don't burn that bridge.
Transparent with me about how you feel about why you're looking to leave, 100%. But you have to remind yourself, emotionally prepare yourself when you're interviewing to stay super PC. And remember, hiring managers are trying to pull you in, right? Yeah. Like, they're trying to get you comfortable. They want to see how much drama you are, or, that kind of thing. So stay really to the plan, right? This is a smaller town. You never know who your CFO knows or those kind of things. And then even from a search perspective, CFO searches. I have 4, but you would never know that if you went to the job boards, right? Like it's this weird, they say Austin is weird, and there is a dynamic because of the relationships. Everybody here is 2 to 3 years of separation from everyone else. So I remind candidates about that, and, talking about social media presence and everything as well. But I also I consult hiring managers so often about your interview process is a reflection of your company. I don't care how great your company is. If your interview process is disorganized, fragmented, drawn out, not only do you lose, I kind of tell them it's like a shiny penny. You lose that shine on a candidate who was highly interested and then hasn't heard from you in 2 weeks. And then it just tells people, it gives someone pause to say, okay, I like everything about the company, but is this how everything works within the company? Because if that's true, maybe this isn't the right opportunity for me. And I think often hiring managers don't always, we talk about this all the time, because it really is the only way that they're making evaluations based on a lot of things, including your processes, right? So we talk about it on both sides, for sure. Candidates, we talk about branding and social media and all those kind of things out there, because if you don't think they're looking at your social media, you're wrong. They are. Again, especially when we're getting close to an offer stage, they are looking for a little, at that point in time, it's not who can do the job. They know you can do the job. They know they have 2 other candidates that can do the job. So now it's little small. It's little small things. Like I hate to say a basic thank you note, within a timely manner, not 2 weeks later, right? And I'm not saying you don't need to put anything in the mail, but something in an email, within a timely manner, not 2 weeks after the fact. Yeah. That could be the game changer between you and someone else, right? So and all these they're looking for little small reasons to rule you out, not rule you in, so that they can make you a decision. So we talk a lot about that with our candidates. We prepare them, for a lot of those things, kind of give them some advice. At the end of the day, it's their skill set, but we really kind of advise them, because a lot of our candidates, they're passive candidates. They haven't interviewed in a long time either, right? So that's part of it as well. So very smaller market, especially in accounting and finance. You take the market and then you go accounting and finance, and it's even smaller.
I think it's interesting too, the coaching and working with that at those higher level execs. I remember when I was working for a marketing firm and it sold and we all exited. You took some time off, and then it was like, oh, well, what am I going to go do? And the first company I walked back into, I was like, I don't know, what do you want me to do? And they're like, this is an interview. And I'm like, I haven't done one of those in a decade. Hold on. Right. I should treat this like an interview.
Right.
So that's funny. Given that StevenDouglas is a function-specific firm, what are the industries that have a significant presence here in Austin, right? So for those kind of looking at this, they see the StevenDouglas name and they go, hey, wonder what's going on out there in Austin. Sure. What is that?
So we work, like I said, I work all the way from smaller privately held companies and not-for-profits. I actually work quite a bit in the not-for-profit space as well, all the way up through large publicly traded companies. Yes. Well, not to segue, but not-for-profits are hard because you talk about culture fit. Culture fit is always important, but even more so at a not-for-profit. And not-for-profits don't have a line item for recruiters. So how do we make that work?
Yeah.
One of the reasons I came here was the ability to build long-term relationships with our clients. We're really good at what we do. I'm not giving away the farm, right? But I understand that. So let's talk about what makes sense, right? And often they are, when you walk in the door, it doesn't matter whether it's the receptionist or the director of IT, everybody there is tied to that mission at some level. And where you don't always find that necessarily in other companies. I mean, you find it, but not quite as deep.
Yeah, you have no reason to be there if you're not tied to the mission. That's, I laugh. My 2 big nonprofits right now are Texas Association of Business Brokers, where I serve on the state board. And it's like, that's what I do. And then the other one is Hill Country Youth Football, right? So it's all the kids, and it's, if you're not aligned, you have no reason being there if you're not aligned. It's the only reason you were there, helping out, serving, and doing that. So it's a completely different world for nonprofits.
And it's, and then it's the skill set that goes along with that too, because there's, a not-for-profit accounting is very different. There's different, just regulations and everything else. And even they're never typically a year end, they're a fiscal year end. There's grant accounting, there's all and they're all created. You've got some that rely 100% on grants. You have some that are more private foundation based.
Yeah.
So forget all that. And then let's talk about the compensation that's associated with that as well. You're not going to a not-for-profit for the most part to make $1 million.
No.
So you also have to know that. I think when I've talked to candidates, they like the idea of a not-for-profit. But then when we're talking brass tacks about what that really entails, they're like, yeah, maybe I'm not quite ready for that yet.
They're not looking to fill their volunteer hours.
No. But we have 3 not-for-profit searches here in town right now, 2 CFO roles and 1 in particular. Typically for for me, they're national searches.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the ones here in Austin, and they typically know the other ones in Austin as well. So, so when people, to your point, when you're asking for people from the outside, I mean, we really have a lot. I mean, you name it. I mean, that's the thing about us, even us from a culture and arts and music. Like, I always tell people, I'll challenge you to find something you're not interested in here, like sports, music. You got an MLS soccer team, like you've got athletics. Like, I mean, I grew up in the Northeast. I love ice hockey. I'm totally at every Texas Stars game, right?
Yeah.
So, and I grew up playing.
That's right. Central Texas has ice hockey as well. We literally have
love
everything.
it, and And I grew up playing soccer. I played college soccer. So for me, like having an MLS team here is huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I say the same thing when we talk about business. Like, I would challenge you to find an industry that's actually not here. Now, are there some more predominant than others? Yes.
Yeah.
But for the most part, but then we also look at some of the companies that say they're Austin-based, like Whole Foods. Whole Foods is really Amazon, really.
Yeah.
But nothing's really changed at Whole Foods. Like, you talk about the M&A world. I've been through multiple acquisitions with a lot of my clients where we're on the inside of that. We just went through that with National Instruments, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how that's going to change and kind of seen the changes there. And I've worked with NI for a really long time. So, but then seeing the acquisition with Whole Foods and Amazon, when you talk about inserting culture and structure, yes, but not changing the culture there. Like, Amazon didn't acquire Whole Foods to do what they're doing. Yeah. They did it to enhance their opportunity to deliver their product. When I went through it with Expedia and HomeAway, totally different story, right? Like, Expedia integrated slowly, and now they've kind of taken over that space a little bit. So, every acquisition's different. And some of them, they don't tell you much until, you're kind of like, not really sure what's going on. Some take a little longer to integrate. Back in the day, I worked with Sweet Leaf Tea through their acquisition with Nestle, and that acquisition was, I thought, smart, because Nestle didn't really want to mess with Sweet Leaf Tea. They were like, we're acquiring you because everything that's great about it. So they really took their time to really integrate, to really understand the brand better. And then having gone through the acquisition with Amplify Snack Brands and Hershey, that was a little bit of a different experience, right? And then you see the change in the culture and the environment. You can feel it. You can feel it when you walk in the door. It's different.
So that's probably the biggest thing when we work with companies that are getting ready to exit. We try to sit down with leadership and we tell them this is a two-way interview. Mm-hmm. Those buyers are interviewing you, but you need to interview them as well.
Sure.
And that's the biggest question we get. Well, who's going to buy us, and what is that going to look like afterwards? And we have no clue. That's the reality. We have no clue who's going to actually buy and what it's going to look like afterwards. And it's an important piece to say, hey, it's a two-way interview. And I think that it's also that way with people looking for jobs here in Austin. Everywhere, it's a two-way interview and everything you're going, and you have to take that time to say, is this what I want? Is this the exit I want? Is it, what am I looking for in a new job, in a new position? Do I want to be the guy who has full control, or do I want to be the cog in the wheel?
Sure.
There's different points in life when you're going to do those different things. So
you mentioned on the M&A part, I have a really, was working with a pretty well-known, pretty successful software as a SaaS, right? Software as a service company here in Austin. And they were looking to go the outside route, right? And I kind of had a really great conversation with the CFO about why they chose to go with the partner that they did. And it was a really interesting story because I think they were all really great partners, but the 3 of the 4 partners, so everybody within that organization had some type of form, shape of equity, right? Mm-hmm. And in that transaction, that CFO and that CEO wanted to make sure that their people earned some money in that transaction.
Yeah.
3 out of the 4 PEs didn't want to talk about it. They're like, yeah, we'll deal with it afterwards. We'll deal with it afterwards. And they're like, no, we want to talk about it now. It's part of the transaction. It's a deal breaker for us. And I think the 3 of them thought that the 4th one would kind of follow the same lead, and they didn't. The 4th one's like, let's talk about it now. What does that look like? And it really was that's why they went with them. Forget deal sheets, term sheets, everything else. They went with them because they understood their culture, their environment, their methodology, and they didn't shy away from a tougher conversation, right? And so it was really interesting to kind of see how that, when you talk about making choices, because a lot of time we do work with, companies that are like, am I ready for that, or am I not ready for that? And what does that look like? Am I willing to give up 10 to 20% of my company, and those kinds of things? So it's an interesting conversation for sure, as far as that goes too.
Back to kind of the recruiting and hiring landscape here. What are some of the trends or shifts that you're seeing impact the recruitment cycle specifically here in Austin?
I think for us, it kind of cycles, right? So you've got, it tends to trend with the quarters, and that's not really a pandemic thing, an Austin thing, or an economic thing. It really is, beginning of the year is a little quieter, or we're more centered on accounting roles, just because you think about it, like, who do we need and who we would like to have? Well, we can't really we bring in finance people or new finance people, there's really we don't really have the final numbers from last year yet. So you'll start to see the beginning of the year, usually January, February, definitely much more accounting focused positions. So we're talking about senior accountant, controller, director of accounting, VP of accounting, CAO, CFO, depending upon which type of CFO you're talking about. I put CFO roles into two buckets. You've got a CFO who's much more finance driven, who's literally come up an entire finance path and is just used to having a really strong controller, right?
Yeah.
And then you have the CFO who's started their career out in public accounting or in accounting themselves and has kind of segued more into a finance role. And those are really two different, it's the first thing we drill down on when we talk to companies about title aside, which one are we talking about, right? Because it's two different types of people. So, and then you'll start to see once, like right now, we're starting to see more finance roles, right? So people are more comfortable, and now we have a good understanding of where our numbers were last year, what they were in comparison to prior. We're working through budgeting forecasting. So now we see more like traditional CFO roles, VPs of finance, FP&A, financial analysts, and that will tend to trend with the quarter. What we are running into is, and this is what's making us so busy right now. So you typically have two bonus payouts. You've got some companies that pay out on January 31st, and then you've got some that don't pay out till March. Oh. So what I'm advising hiring managers right now is be really close to your people on your team that you feel like might be a risk or aren't happy, but you want to keep, because once they get that bonus,
that's when
in March, they're like, so if they haven't already signed an offer and are waiting for their bonus, they're getting ready to kick off their search then. We saw that happen after January 31st, where people were like, okay, I mean, we knew we had people that actually had signed our offer letters and were waiting to get their bonus paid out, right? So you're going to see that cycle again in March as well. And that kind of happens every year, which again puts a little bit of a tighter on the talent as far. And then the summer, as you trend towards, like I said, the quarters, it tends to get a little bit quieter on the quarters for my world, just because I'd love to say that we're the priority of everyone's day, but they're doing quarter close. Right now they're still dealing with auditors that are typically on site. Most of my clients I go out to, and it's like Deloitte, EY, KPMG, right? So I know I had that for me as well. And I used to be like, tell me what your deliverables are, because I need to literally tell me about the scope of your engagement so I can put you over there. And then the summer is just a little quieter because everyone gets a little bit distracted, or the hiring process starts to drag out a little bit, right? Like they are still hiring. And then you see that rebound from the summer, where I call it like the running to catch up mode, right?
Yeah.
Because now they're like, oh, I should have hired in the summer, and now I got to scramble away from that, right? And then third quarter is typically often the busiest for us, because it's that reaction from the summer, and then it's that proactive, I don't want to hire around Thanksgiving, because that's when people start to tap out. So if you're in accounting and finance, if you're not running from anything and you're in an environment where you're passively looking, you don't feel great about resigning if you're a controller on December 15th. You're like, okay, I'm leaving at the end of the year, and then I've got vacation and holidays. So most people will table the search right between that time of, I would say, Thanksgiving and like Christmas.
Yeah.
So I always tell clients, and so that third quarter is usually like what's often that's crazy. So it kind of tends to cycle, and it tends to cycle in different ways. Whether it's accounting or whether it's finance, we're starting to see more finance now, but that's again, from 18 years of doing this, I've seen this happen like every single year.
Earlier, you talked about demand being really, really high and talent not being there so much. So what are some of the challenges you see as far as like a talent drought here in Central Texas? What does that look like?
So a lot of it is, that we talk about, a lot of it's just first and foremost is flexible working schedule. Like you can't get around it. It is what it is, right? Yeah. And I would say candidates, I think, are having to catch up a little bit more. We work in 25 different markets. And if you look at our remote sheet of jobs, 2 years ago, it was a lot of leadership roles because of necessity. Now, not so much. Now it's more technical roles, plug and play roles. I think candidates in their mind still think that they can get a leadership role or be in some type of higher level role and still have that 100% working opportunity. And you don't really have that. Collectively here in Austin, most companies, I say, are really embracing a hybrid schedule. At least three days. Average is 3 days in the office, 2 days remote. Some are baby stepping where they're like, we don't really want it. We're going to give you some flexibility, but we're going to do 4 days in the office, 1 day remote. Even just a little bit of something opens up your pool of candidates.
Yeah.
And I think what people don't understand is you're always going to get that one person who takes advantage of a remote working opportunity. But for the most part, most people, it usually comes from a good place. It's a lot of times it's So we were working remotely. Now my life has changed. My commitments outside of work, like, I'm a parent. I mean, my son's 18, so I don't pick him up anymore. But, if I've committed to my husband or my significant other that I'm going to pick up kids the 2 days I work remotely and he's on 3, how much am I going to really change that if I don't have to? Right. And so I think it's not just, hey, I just don't want to work in the office. And I think it's traffic too. I honestly think if you're sitting in 2 hours of traffic, you're like, oh my God, I could be so much more productive.
Yeah.
But I think there's industries that absolutely you have to be on site. Like we work in the financial services space, like a bank. Like you got to, there's not just you need to be there just because of the way it's structured, but from a technology and a security perspective, you can't be doing anything remotely in the banking world. It just wouldn't make a lot of sense. Not for a traditional bank anyways, right? So I think the flexible working thing, that creates a talent drought for us because we tell clients if you're requiring on-site 5 days a week, it's definitely going to reduce the talent pool for us, especially when you know what you're competing against. And we really drill down on our candidates on that. Like, tell me in your priority, like, what's your preference without me leading them into that? Like, is it remote? Is it hybrid? Because if their first preference is remote, I'm not talking to them about any jobs because I would be looking out for the client. The client engages us, they're just going to jump for the next thing that is remote. So we kind of really drill down on that. But we also advise companies who aren't really sure what flexibility means. But I think there's some industries that just aren't built for that either. Even from a technology perspective, they're just not built for that as well. So that's the one challenge. Comp is the other challenge. Compensation is just tied to revenues. And I think people coming from the larger company, like my company is coming from a large publicly traded company like a Dell or like, or like AMD, I think they like the idea of a small pre-revenue startup. But if you're trying to compare
they see
comp,
that paycheck.
so it's got to be about something more. In my world, if you're a good accounting and finance professional, it's not. If you're going to get counteroffer, you're going to get one. So let's talk about what that looks like. Because the talent is so tight here. What candidates don't necessarily understand is it is cheaper to keep you and pay you more than to lose you.
Yeah.
For me, a counteroffer, though, to me would be almost offensive because, now you value me. So, everybody feels different about that, which is why when we talk to candidates, if they tell us, listen, I love everything about my job. I like the people I work with. I like the industry. I just feel like I need to be making more. Go have that conversation first. Go before we start working with you, because if you're a larger company, my pre-revenue startup is never going to beat that counteroffer, right? And then that's just a waste of everyone's time. And if you've already had that conversation, different story. But hiring managers, leadership can't change what they're not aware of, right? So go talk to them first, vet that out first. If that's not negotiable or there's not a change, then let's talk, right? Now, so it's got to be compensation, yes, but it's got to be more than that. It's got to be something more than just the compensation, right? So that's kind of where the talent drought runs into. And then for me, really, us being a smaller market, when I am working with the bigger companies who want, like I'm working with a company right now. They are about a $400 million private equity-backed company. They have a new CAO and a CFO. We talk about all the time. We want someone who knows what good looks like, right? So the depth of talent for people who've seen something, like I can't put anyone in there who hasn't seen something more than 300 million.
Yeah.
And when you're in a market that you've got lots of QuickBooks and NetSuite, I need someone who's seen an ERP system, right? And so that makes the talent drought as well, just especially when I'm working with companies that are on the upper echelon of that, which is why I tap my Dallas and my Houston team. That's why I top first, just because if we're talking about Texas and relocation, if they want to stay closer to family or that kind of thing, it's more realistic if you're like in the Dallas, and Houston area. And then we work in you mentioned we're from Temple. I work with companies in Temple. Then you've got all the towns in between as well. So
it's easier to scoot a couple hours than whole state.
Exactly. A whole state, whole time zone, that kind of thing. So that's kind of what makes I'd say for us, that kind of what makes, and then, from 18 years of doing this, so the two women that work with me, Tara James and Stephanie Anderson, both have been doing this for a long time with me as well. They worked with me in my prior firm, one for about 13 years, the other for 6. Because this market is small, we have this clear advantage of there's just name recognition too. Certain names that come across our desk were like, like they lied. Well, for hard black and white reasons, they lied to us. We know their education is legit, or I think job hopping is. You really have to drill into that. If you have to understand if someone's been at 5 jobs in 5 years, but they've always played in the startup space. Well, that's worth a conversation because you can't in a non-revenue generating seat. You can't. Obviously, you're a risk taker, which is fine, but you can't predict where that's going to go.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it as well. Is really understanding that. But yeah, I mean, I think we're lucky to be in Austin as well. I think more companies are coming here than leaving here for sure, and we tend to be insulated from a lot too.
Yeah. I think that kind of ties into the next question of when you're working with those companies, they're truly seeking top tier talent.
Sure.
Right. That's a little bit different. When you're working with those companies, how do you navigate those discussions around compensation, around freedom, around all of that? What's the difference there?
So when we're working a C-level search, which is typically, so we have two hiring options for us: contingency search, which means you don't pay me anything until I find somebody, and then retained search. So all of our senior level searches are retained, which is a completely different strategy than contingency search. So we're sitting with the hiring manager, walking through what a day in the life looks like, walking through skill set, walking through the interview process, walking through the compensation structure, right? And part of what we're telling them is, okay, tell me what your budget is, because obviously they'll have a budget. And then we are able to use the experience that we have within StevenDouglas, not just me, but across our multiple markets that work in C-level search. Like, where is that falling? Like, are you, because salary guides,
are you competitive
here in Austin? They're all over. They're all over the map. So I always tell, whether it's clients, future clients, or potential clients, call me. I can tell you what is in real time. So we walk them through whether it's competitive, what the bonus is tied to, and then the equity component. Pre-IPO equity or pre-event equity is always not a tricky valuation. Most recently, I've seen, I'd say, if you asked me a year ago, it was more number of shares, number of options. Now I'm seeing more of a percentage. I'd say CFO roles for the most time are more of a percentage, usually somewhere between here in Austin, the most I've seen is like 0.5 to maybe 2%. That's the most. But again, at that level, and we do convey to the clients at that level, compensation and the base is part of it. But if you are a private equity or a VC-backed company, that CFO is so much more interested in the equity play. Like, you can be more negotiable on the base because they are at a place in their career where that is more motivating them to than anything else. And that's why often when we get CFO searches where it's a company that's PE or VC-backed and they don't have an equity component, we're like, why? Like, why? What's the motivator for a CFO to come in and build this for you? And so, and some of it's not negotiable, but often, we tell them if we talk about talent pool, we just cut that talent pool in half, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's amazing. I talked to the Job Seekers Network here in town, which is a faith-based type organization, and it's a former Dell guy that runs it. He's fantastic. And I go out there and give conversations about how to interview and negotiate compensation. And it kind of blows my mind sometimes. I have C-level execs that are afraid to ask, like they're afraid it comes across as not knowledgeable, and a lot of them are like, you know what? I got into the company and I didn't realize that my bonus was tied to that or that my equity was worth that. I'm like, how did you not ask that? And I think it's the fear of coming across like I don't understand or I'm not knowledgeable. And I tell them, by the time you're talking numbers, you have the job. You don't need to worry about that, right? Like, they're not going to pull the job because you didn't understand how their equity is structured, right? The worst thing is, though, going in and then now your hands are tied, right?
Not to throw myself under the bus here, but I do have some stock options in a company here that I believe is never going to go public. And my ownership was not a percentage; it was a number of stock.
Yeah.
And comically, it was like 4 months in, they split that stock like 3 times in front of me, and I was just like, this is worth nothing.
No, and dilution, big time.
And I didn't ask. I was like, all right, I'm just happy to be here, happy to be in. And so that's great that you guys are pre-thinking that out and working with people to have those conversations and do that, because it's a thing. You're like, especially if it's, I was a little bit younger, you're on those first kind of steps up of, hey, yeah, stock options. That means I'm invested, right? And you're like, well, you could be, but maybe.
We call that phantom equity.
Yeah, got a lot of that in a couple companies around here.
It feels good.
It felt good at the time.
Not when it's split.
I think at one point too, I like went back and it was like less than 10 cents a share. It was like pretty funny. They had split. Yeah, it was useless.
Well, and to your point, that's what we talk about when they say equity. There's a difference between equity and meaningful equity. And if you can't literally give me at least a good understanding or ballpark understanding of a timeline in an event, that changes how we describe the equity to somebody. We're working with a PE right now. I know, so a lot of our business comes directly from the relationships that we have with our PE and VC partners, not just here in Austin, but across StevenDouglas. And I would say that often, like there's one I know, having worked with this private equity firm, their holding period is somewhere between 3 to 5 years. And in general, that's usually a transfer of ownership to another PE, right?
Yeah.
So, and we know that, and we know that's a hard, and they have no problem committing to that. It's the ones that waver on that, or especially when you have a founder-led company, they decide they want to sell, then they don't, and then you're like, okay, it was worth something yesterday, and now it's not today. So, and we kind of know the reputation or the methodology or the, like I said, like the MO that comes with each of our PEs or VCs that we work with, so that we can accurately explain it. But that's the difference when we talk to someone about, yes, you'll have equity, or meaningful equity will actually translate to something actually valuable for you.
That is my one takeaway right now of equity versus meaningful equity.
Absolutely.
That is a great terminology right there. I think you're already hinting about the equity versus meaningful equity, but what other strategic approaches do you guys bring? I think that one was a huge one, but what do you guys bring in for those negotiations with a candidate and the company?
So often when we get to a place where we're like agreeing to disagree and we're talking, we're not quite where we need to be. We also say, like, what about a sign-on? I think even when you're individually, like, even forget just me negotiating, but if you're on your own and you're negotiating, some things to think about as a candidate. Think about a sign-on. A sign-on, you're putting a little skin in the game. It gets you to where you need to be and where you're more comfortable on the base. You know that you're paying that back if you're leaving within, typically it's a year.
Yeah.
So so it's a commitment on your side. It gets you to where you need to be, right? Or let's talk about candidates. Like, if you get to an offer that you're okay with, like we always screen with our candidates. We're like, what's an offer you would accept? What's an offer that would be great? And then what's an offer that's over the moon, right? And we kind of be able to give our clients those tiers, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the other 90-day review. I always tell candidates, like, say, listen, I will accept the offer as it is today. But once you actually see what I can do, depending upon the level of the role, like 90 days, I think for a CFO might be hard, right? Yeah. But 90 days for like a controller or an accounting manager, once I'm once I'm a proven entity here,
meaningful impact,
it's much easier for you to negotiate once they've seen what you can do, and it's easier for them to come to some reason versus you trying to negotiate that out of the gate. So I often think that candidates sometimes forget those other two pieces, where it's like, okay, I like my offer, I'm okay with it. Because when you walk into a company and you're like, and you kind of feel like you settled,
that's not fun.
I'm type A. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I think my hiring manager would be like, okay, so she likes her offer, she doesn't love it, right? But don't forget about those other two pieces, right? Like, ask a company, like, so you know really where I want to be on comp. Can we schedule? Is it, and no commitment from anybody, but if I'm performing like I feel like I'm performing, let's do a 90-day review and kind of see where we're at, right? And make sure you understand when a company does review and pay. That's another one. Make sure you understand when a company's review process looks like and when they do adjustments. Now, again, don't ask that on the first interview. Oh my gosh, you just started. It's like dating. Like, you need them to fall in love with you, not just in like with you. There is a strategic time and point that you talk about these things. If you start talking about when do I get a review and a bump in comp on your first interview, you're way putting the cart before the horse, right? So, but the same with the sign-on bonus. The sign-on bonus is a really good way for a company to not have to mess with, because a lot of it's internal equity too, right? Yeah. Like, they might want to pay $1 million, but if they're paying the peer to you, $500,000, they're not going to pay you $1 million.
Yeah.
Because it's keeping the internal equity and culture. And that's the thing about accounting and finance. Most people there are probably going to see at some level what you are. If you're in payroll, like, they're going to know what you're making, right? Yeah. So it's not, and to keep it, everybody happy internally, especially at a larger company, you really can't do that because of SOX internal controls. But even smaller companies want to kind of keep everybody in the same realm. So sometimes they really can't mess with that salary or that salary range, but they can bring a sign-on for you. Or, if you've got a bonus you're walking away from, make sure you tell them that, because sometimes they can incorporate that into your salary. We just did that with a controller. She couldn't pay her whole bonus, but she was able to get her 90%. And because otherwise we were going to have to wait to her to start till April. And that just wasn't going to work for the CFO here in town. So we literally talked about what would make sense. She's like, listen, I can't pay her the whole thing. But because they're a smaller company, she's like, I can pay her 90% of it. And she was like, great, huge. Fantastic. Yeah. And she knows that that's repayable if she leaves in a certain period of time, or, if something should happen. So I think when you get to a place where you like your offer, but you don't love it, remember there's always, and here's the thing, sometimes people are just afraid to ask.
Yeah.
Just make sure you're communicating in the right way. Like, I compare it to like an Oreo cookie, like, positive, love my offer, excited to be here, ready to start. is this part negotiable at all? But I really still want to be on board. You want to make sure they know that you're not, if you're in, regardless, right? You wanted them to know that you're just asking the questions. That's all. And it's okay if it's a no. Like you just to make sure I had a candidate, I can tell people things all day long, but he used it as an ultimatum. They rescinded the offer, right?
Yeah.
Like if you don't move to this, I'm not taking it, even though I knew that, and again, I coached him not that way, but it wasn't what he was, again, it wasn't the information, it was how he communicated it, right? And that's often the problem. It's not it's the same thing with resigning and giving your notice. It's all about how you communicate that, right? It's not necessarily the information. So
no, personalities are completely different across the board. Some people ultimatum might work. You came to me with an ultimatum, I'd be like, it's unfortunate. It doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah, I don't work in the world of ultimatums. I'd be like, don't let the door hit you on the head.
I think we kind of hit on this earlier, but the work flexibility going in 3 days a week. I'm guessing at the answer here, but is that something that's unique to Austin? What are you seeing that you guys work in different markets? So how is that playing out in the other markets versus what we're seeing here in Austin?
I say when we talk, like this morning, we actually had our all hands call for all of our remote jobs. So we all talk about like what we're looking for in remote jobs. I say collectively, that's kind of the average is 3 days, 2 days. Some companies have more of an advantage of doing that. Back to Whole Foods as a client, they have 11 different regional offices. So they're like, we're not remote. I'm like, I know you're not remote, but you're like 11 different choices, So but I'd say collectively, I'd say that's kind of what they're embracing is like the 3-2 schedule really for the most part is that kind of flexibility when you're looking at that. And I think part of also, I always advise candidates, and we drill down on this, when you're interviewing with a company, make sure if it's remote, talk about whether it's remote today, not remote tomorrow. I've seen that happen. If your role is open to being remote, but your entire team is in Pennsylvania, like, okay, like why? Number one. Number two, how much do I have to travel? Number two. Number three, is there anything that would change that for any reason? And then just from a personal perspective, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about your entire team being in an office cohesively and you're here? So you have to think about that dynamic. But I have seen companies that are remote today, not remote tomorrow, because sometimes, some things you can't control, but really drill down on it, especially when you see a dynamic like that. Now, it's different if you've got a company, like we have a company right now that sits 100% in the cloud, right? I've placed 2 of their C-level execs here in town. And when you look at their C-level execs, they're everywhere, like in Atlanta, Chicago, so that is really embracing the remote, right? Yeah. So part of really looking at that though, because once you do that, now you're remote, yes, but if they said we need you to come to Pennsylvania once a month, and then they say, well, we really need you here twice a month, well, now you're at the mercy of that, right? Yeah. And so really drill down on that because I've seen companies really kind of rethinking that, especially in a leadership role. Yeah. I'd say some of these plug and play roles, most of our roles that are remote right now, I'd say are more technical and plug and play with larger companies like SEC reporting, tax. Tax is just a big supply demand issue regardless. Yeah. So a lot of these, what I consider middle management roles, but if they are willing to be remote, really dig into that because if that is really one of your primary motivators, that could quickly change the other way. And then you're kind of like, like I said, you're at the mercy of that. And then you become the travel warrior, which was never your plan, right?
Yeah. I think you hit on coaching candidates, and you guys do that a lot. So how pivotal is the personal brand or the professional networks for some of the candidates to stand out in a job market like this?
So I'd say when LinkedIn is the platform. Like tomorrow might be something different, but today LinkedIn is the professional platform where people are looking. So when you're thinking about your brand, everybody is different. Like we even talk about that internally at StevenDouglas. Like everybody here is different. Like for me, my brand, like I mentioned, my son's 18. I don't share anything about my son. Like that's just not me, right? But I have other people within StevenDouglas. Like that's how they feel like they emotionally are connect to their people, right? And we're always saying, be authentic to who you are, but be careful about what you like, what you comment on. We're not saying not to be you, but you don't ever want, again, a company not to hire you because of something that they feel like that you're going to be conflict issue, right? And we do that, and it's not saying you can't be out. There's a platform for you to be authentic about those things. LinkedIn and during your job search is not one of them, right? And even I think people forget about what they like too and comment on like that everything follows you. Your brand on LinkedIn, I would say, and if anyone needs these, we have an incredible technology group because we do accounting and finance search, but we do technology, supply chain, sales and marketing, HR, and then legal, and then interim resources group. So we offer more than just, I stay in my lane, but we have other ones as well. And our technology group does an incredible job David, yes, David, I'm calling you out, Dave Burleson does an incredible job of really digging into LinkedIn and the algorithms behind that. And if you follow his algorithms, I promise you, you'll have more followers, you'll get more connections, you'll have more visibility. And some of this are just beyond me. I'm good at accounting and finance. But part of it is making sure you're putting something into your title that's searchable, right? So if you want people to find you, and making sure if you are a passive job seeker, there's a way. All of us recruiters in this business have, for the most part, access to a product called LinkedIn Recruiter. Yeah. Which means you can show us that you're looking, but you don't have to put that open to work thing. Like, I think we talk about this. I think we've agreed to disagree about how we feel about people putting that on there and not putting it on there. I think some people think, well, I might as well put it out there if I'm unemployed. And I think some people are like, well, then it looks like you're just looking for a job. We agree, disagree about what we think about. But within LinkedIn Recruiter, you can privatize that so we can see that you're open to work. That's how we often sort through people. But putting things, writing up your summary for the job that you're looking for and the job that you're wanting. And then there's a whole nother part that we coach about, saturating. We talk about this all the time. You can easily saturate the market in Austin with your resume. Yeah. And people don't understand that. And so I give especially my unemployed candidates, I kind of give them homework. I say, do more of a proactive and a reactive approach. In the morning, do more of a reactive approach. Go find the 4 or 5 jobs that you really want to apply for. 4 or 5. Don't do 25. 4 or 5. Apply for those. Don't apply for multiple jobs at one company. And don't send 15 resumes. The hiring managers there talk. Pick the ones that you know that you can do, that you can walk in the door where you add value add. And then flip that around. In the afternoon, take your experience, take especially your industry experience. Go find those companies in Austin where you know you would actually add value from day one because you've got industry knowledge. Don't go and see what they're looking for. Don't go see if they have a job post. Go approach who you knew to be the hiring manager through LinkedIn as a casual, hey, your company's been on my radar. I have industry-related experience. I'm not really sure if you're looking to hire, but I'd love to be open to the conversation. It helps your brain also turn off from getting frustrated from submitting applications. Yeah. But it also gives you a different way to approach and dig up something. That company might be hiring, maybe not now, but maybe for you they might, because you're here and you have industry-related knowledge. It's how we place a lot of our people, is because I know the industries we talk about CPGs. Mm-hmm. When I have somebody who's got consumer products experience here, my CFOs or my hiring managers know that even if they're not hiring, I never show them a volume. But if I have someone really great, I'll show them to you, because maybe they're not hiring now, but maybe they have that position teed up for next quarter, right? Yeah. So I always tell candidates, especially ones that are not currently employed, like, try to just pace yourself, because if you start mass marketing your resume, like, hiring managers will talk. I mean, I had a guy come from a bigger market here, it was Big Four, came from Houston to Dallas, where you probably don't run into this as much. He was talking to multiple recruiters. As I tell my candidates, I never send your resume without asking you first. Yeah. Apparently, these other ones didn't understand that. They were sending his resume everywhere, right? And to the point where I sent his resume, and I literally had an audit partner say, you know what, Laurie, he looks good on paper, but his resume has come across my desk 4 times. So for me, I'm not even willing to talk to him. The fact that he doesn't actually know where his resume is floating, it wasn't even his fault, right? He just came from a bigger market and didn't really understand that. So he called me and he's like, what do I do? I said, you need to go back and either fire or control your recruiters, because unfortunately, and I can unravel some of this for you, because now I can go back, now that I've talked to you, and tell that hiring manager, listen, he didn't know. He didn't give them knowledge or the authority to do that. So, but it is easy to kind of, like I said, because hiring managers within companies, if you've applied to 6 different roles at a company, and especially not if they're closely related, like if they're in the same vertical, but if you're applying to audit, tax, financial analyst, then they're like, okay, he clearly doesn't know what he wants to do, right?
And we've done that. I mean, I'm obviously much smaller, but we go through and all of a sudden it's like, you just applied for 3 jobs at the same time. It's the first question I ask is, well, what do you want to do? Right. And it's weird, because it's not, hey, what do I need? I need all 3, but it's, what do you want to do? Right. I want you to be in a position that you want and you love and you enjoy, so that you stick around forever. Absolutely. Not just here for the paycheck, and then the next time you get one, you're out. So.
Absolutely.
As we wrap up here, and I think you just did this, but in your experience, what advice or insights can you offer to those candidates to enhance their personal brand, or to make sure that they control their resume or anything like that? What's kind of your last little giving advice there?
Put a picture on LinkedIn. Oh gosh, just put a picture. And not a picture of you on 6th Street doing shots, okay? A professional picture. It doesn't have to be something you pay for. iPhones are great, or any type of phone. Just get a picture for the job you're interviewing for. In my world, less is more. I'm in accounting and finance. In the creative world, it might be something different. But at the end of the day, using Whole Foods as an example, it's super, super casual to work there. Everybody wears jeans. When you interview there, they still want to know that you do the right thing. Yeah. Right. So put that picture. I mean, again, it's for the job that you're looking to interview for. Make sure in your summary, and so many times I see people that have their title and then like one line in them for the job, and like put some meat to that, like so that without me even talking to you, I at least have a better understanding of what you're doing, right? And then your title as well, like make sure you're putting your title in there, make sure it's easily accessible for me to find you. Put some type of personal summary there and about you. Again, making sure that it's professional enough for me to give a vibe about you, but not so much where I feel like you're going to be like this, like again, internal conflict risk, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest compliment I get is when I meet people that I've never met before, and they're like, I feel like I know you, because they follow me on LinkedIn or because they see my profile and how it's written, right? And then the other advice I too, like we talk about AI and ChatGPT, that is good for some things.
Yeah.
On the resume, please don't use ChatGPT to write your resume. I can call you out in 2 seconds. Like, and please don't just convert your LinkedIn profile into a resume format for me like that. I need more than that. Now, using ChatGPT, put in your thoughts. Using AI or ChatGPT to help you write that in a more professional manner, that's fantastic. That's great.
Yeah.
But it still has to be your initial thoughts. And I think that's
supposed to be you.
It's supposed to be you. It's the genuine, authentic part. I can tell when I see other postings out there that you can just totally tell that they're ChatGPT. And I think in some worlds that works really great. In this world, they still want to know there's a personal vibe to that as well. But I think the picture, your job description, some meat to what you've done, your education, like all the groups that you're involved in. One additional thing that is huge for me, go get references. You can actually ask directly through LinkedIn for references.
Yeah.
That is huge for me. It's one of the first places I go to.
Interesting.
Is, you can literally ask them. It doesn't take them long. It's actually super easy for a prior hiring manager. Obviously, if you're currently working, I'm not expecting your current company, but prior hiring manager, that is actually a differentiator for me when I actually see someone that actually has some references on that as well. And then just sometimes, especially in my world of accounting and finance, self-promotion is often hard.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's definitely going to put you outside of your comfort zone. But often things that are uncomfortable for you in life are often the best things ever, right? I mean, for me, perfect example, I came from a firm where I was for 15 years that was local. If you asked me 3 years ago if I would have been in a national firm, I would have laughed at you, right?
Yeah.
Like, because I was like, a totally different story, right? I would have thought, again, and I tell clients the same thing, sometimes you have to interview. It's like kissing frogs or whatever you want to call it, or dating.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes what you think you want isn't what you want until you start interviewing.
Yeah.
And that's okay. There's no commitment there. You're just interviewing. For me, I interviewed with 6 different firms. I interviewed with 3 local firms. I would have thought I would have gone to the local firms. But after I actually talked to them and said, that's kind of more what I already have. And here I have this incredible learning opportunity, get to be mentored by others who know this business better than myself.
Yeah.
That was the deal maker for me. So, sometimes, especially people who are coming out of one industry, like public accounting, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So sometimes you think, well, you want something, and then you actually interview and you're like, oh my gosh. And we talk about that all the time. Like, you thought you wanted a large publicly traded company, and now you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want nothing to do with that. So then we kind of scale that back. And it's okay to do that. It's the same on hiring managers. Sometimes hiring managers have to interview a couple people, especially with a new job.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I wanted this, but now I really want this. And that's where we work with clients to say, okay, let's pivot. Let's pivot now. Don't tell me after I've submitted, 6 people to you that now we need to go find a different skill set.
Yeah.
Let's pivot so we don't have buyer's remorse in 6 months from now, not just for you, but for the candidate as well. Right.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and some of this is just really simple, but the social media stuff, like the picture thing, it drives my clients crazy. Like, they're like, does it have a picture? I don't understand why I have a picture.
No, I mean, not to derail us too much here, but I thought everyone was on it. I actually went to refer someone a few weeks ago, and they didn't have a LinkedIn. I was like, what are you doing? How am I supposed to refer you? I send a link. I copy paste.
Right.
Like, come on.
Right.
So that,
and, maybe in a different life, it'll be a different platform, but right now that is what it is. So you've got to kind of take that and, as that's the platform, like make the most of it.
Yeah.
But there is a science to it as well, especially in my world. But again, conservative for sure, because it's accounting and finance at the end of the day. So, less is more. But those are just some basic overall pointers.
No, I think that's great. And cleaning up your online profile is a thing. So no matter what channel it is. But I think it's been a great conversation. Greatly appreciate your time and your insight. For those that are listening and they want to reach out to you and contact you and find out more about StevenDouglas or you personally, how do they do about that? How can they contact you?
So you have my email address, which is lcanepa@StevenDouglas.com. My phone number, which is 512-569-5334. You can also reach out to me through LinkedIn as well. I'm on there as well. And I'm always open to, I think sometimes people feel like if I contact a recruiter, it's like I'm committed to something. No, It's just a conversation. And that's whether it's from a candidate perspective or from a client perspective. I'm always open to talk about market intel or those kind of things. But like I said, we're accounting and finance and we're not industry specific. We cover 25 different markets. So even if you're looking to relocate from here, I have some really great partners in other markets as well. But yeah, no,
Who would want to leave Austin?
I'm a warm weather girl born in the Northeast. Everyone complains about the heat, but I embrace the heat. Great.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. If you enjoyed what you heard today, you can always reach out to us. Follow us on X at the EXP Exchange or visit our website at expertexchange.pro. That's expertexchange.pro. For more resources and information related to today's episode, you'll find that on our website. We'll link to your LinkedIn, and you can go online at StevenDouglas.com, or we'll plug in your LinkedIn website and your email. Remember, success is a journey, and we are thrilled to be a part of yours. We'll see you next time on the Expert Exchange.
Content on this show is information of a general nature and does not address the circumstances of any particular individual or entity. Nothing in this show constitutes professional or financial advice, nor does any information on the show constitute a comprehensive or complete statement of the matters discussed or the law relating thereto. The Expert Exchange is not a fiduciary by virtue of any person's use of or access to this content. You alone assume the sole responsibility of evaluating the merits and risks associated with the use of any information or content on the show before making any decisions based on such information. In exchange for using the content, you agree not to hold the Expert Exchange, its affiliates, or any third-party service provider liable for any possible claim for damages arising from any decision you make based on information or other content made available to you through the show. The Expert Exchange is not licensed to practice law or provide legal advice. Nothing contained within this show is intended to be an offer to either buy or sell securities.